It is the most famous scene in French history. A teenage girl in borrowed armor walks into a crowded hall, picks the disguised king out of a crowd of his own courtiers, and names him the true king of France by the light of God alone. Painted 100 times. Taught to every French child. And almost none of it happened the way you were told. On a cold February day in 1429, that girl really did climb to this rock. But what actually happened here is stranger than the legend, because this fortress is full of truths stranger than its legends. Long before Joan of Arc ever climbed to it, this pale rock above the river had already killed one king, buried an empire, and locked away the last master of the most feared order in Christendom. Where the beautiful chateaux downstream were built for pleasure, this place was built for power, and the crown changed hands here violently again and again. This is the fortress where a war turned, an empire ended, and a girl found her king. This is Chinon. For most of 1,000 years, somebody was always trying to take this rock, and for most of that time, they failed. Here is why. Chinon stands on a long spine of pale limestone, rising some 40 meters straight above the River Vienne, the great southern tributary of the Loire. Whoever held this height held the river crossing below and the road inland. So anyone who wanted to rule this country had to take the ridge first. Men have fought over it for 3,000 years. A late Roman fort up here held off a siege as early as the year 463. And what the defenders built was never a single castle. The kings who held it spoke of their 3 castles, 3 separate strongholds strung along the ridge, divided by deep ditches cut into the living rock and once crossed by drawbridges. At the western point, the Fort du Coudray and its great round tower. In the center, the Château du Milieu, the royal heart with its tall gate tower and the roofless shell of the Great Hall. And to the east, the Fort Saint-Georges, guarding the only easy way in. End to end it runs nearly 400 meters. 4 centuries of military engineering, walls splayed at the base to throw off a sapper's pick, arrow slits cut clean through solid stone. It is warm and pale and almost gentle to look at now. It was not built to be gentle. It was built to be held. The first to fortify the height in stone were the Counts of Blois. Around the year 954, a count with the wonderful nickname of Theobald the Trickster raised a stone tower on the eastern point and ringed it with a wall of its own. For the next century, the rock was a prize, fought over between 2 rival houses, Blois and Anjou. Anjou won. In 1044, the Angevin counts seized the whole region of the Touraine, and Chinon passed into their hands. And the House of Anjou was rising fast, pressed between the King of France, the Duke of Aquitaine, and the Duke of Normandy, and outgrowing them all. One of its counts, Geoffrey the Fair, took a nickname from the sprig of broom he is said to have worn in his hat, in Latin planta genista, Plantagenet. It is one of the most famous names in European history, and it started here, on the Middle Loire. Geoffrey's son changed everything. In 1152, he married Eleanor of Aquitaine, the most powerful heiress in Europe, joining her vast southern duchy to his own lands in Anjou and Normandy. 2 years later, he became Henry II, King of England. Look at what that meant on a map. From the border of Scotland to the Pyrenees, a single family now ruled England, half of France, and everything in between. Historians would later call it the Angevin Empire, and it was one of the greatest powers of the medieval world. It had no true capital. Its court moved with the king. But it had a center of gravity, a favorite fortress near the heart of all those lands, and that fortress was Chinon. Henry loved this place. He strengthened it. He held court here among one of the most brilliant circles in 12th century Europe. And he built a palace inside the eastern fort, so fine that historians did not even know it existed, until archaeologists uncovered its foundations 800 years later beneath a garden. From this rock, the Plantagenets ruled an empire, and on this rock, that empire began to die. Henry II was, by any measure, one of the ablest kings England ever had. He was destroyed by his own sons. In the last years of his reign, they turned on him. again and again, and worst of all, his heir, Richard, the one they would one day call the Lionheart, allied himself with Henry's greatest enemy, Philip II of France, and made war on his own father. Old, sick, and beaten in the field, Henry was driven back through his own territory in the summer of 1189, until he could go no further than Chinon. He came home to his favorite fortress to die. Ill and feverish, he asked for the list of the nobles who had conspired against him with his son. And at the very top of that list was a name he could not bear to read, his youngest and best-loved son, John, the child he had trusted, who had gone over to the enemy with all the rest. They say he turned his face to the wall and stopped fighting. The chronicler Gerald of Wales records the words the dying king murmured over and over in that room, the bitterest epitaph a ruler ever gave himself.
Shame, shame on a conquered king.
He died on the 6th of July, 1189. And then came the final indignity. The moment the breath left him, his attendants fell on the body, stripping it of its jewels, its fine clothes, everything of value, and left their king lying all but naked and unattended in the room, until someone, in pity, threw a cloak over him. The most powerful monarch in Europe, robbed by his own servants in the hour of his death. They carried him the short distance to the Abbey of Fontevraud and laid him down. His painted stone effigy still rests there today, beside the tomb of Eleanor of Aquitaine, the wife who had outlived him, and the empire that would not outlive them both by long. The brilliant Plantagenet court that had filled this ridge in Henry's lifetime never found its footing here again. Within 16 years, the fortress they had loved would belong to the enemy. The crown passed to that youngest son, the one at the top of the list. John became King of England in 1199, when Richard the Lionheart died with an arrow in his shoulder. Whatever else can be said of John, he understood what Chinon was worth. He prepared it for war, and the tall gate tower that still guards the middle castle, the tower we now call the Tour de l'Horloge, has its lower stages from his reign, around the year 1200. He did everything right. It was not enough. Because across the border sat Philip II of France, Philip Augustus, the same king who had helped break Henry, and the most dangerous man of his age. In 1204, he found his excuse, marched his armies into John's continental lands, and laid siege to the great fortress on the Vienne. Chinon did not fall easily. It held for months, long, grinding months, the garrison waiting for a relief that never came, while John across the Channel failed to save it. But no fortress holds forever without help. On the 23rd of June, 1205, the supposedly impregnable rock surrendered to the crown of France. And with it, the whole edifice came down. Normandy was already gone. Now Chinon and the heartland of the Angevin lands were gone too, and the vast cross-channel empire that had been ruled from this spur simply ceased to exist. It left a wound between the English and French crowns that would fester for generations, and in time help feed the 100 Years' War. An empire had died on this rock. Philip Augustus knew exactly what he had taken, and he made it unmistakably his own. He raised the great round keep that still dominates the western point, cut the ditches deeper, and stiffened the walls with new towers pierced for archers on 3 levels. Chinon was a royal French fortress now, and within a century it would hold one of the most notorious prisoners in the history of France. In 1307, the King of France was a cold and calculating man named Philip IV, Philip the Fair, and he had a problem. He was deep in debt to the wealthiest organization in Christendom, the Knights Templar, the warrior monks who had become the bankers of Europe. So he destroyed them. On a single morning in October 1307, Philip had the Templars across France arrested all at once on charges of heresy and their confessions extracted under torture. And the following summer, 5 of the order's highest officers, including the Grand Master himself, Jacques de Molay, were brought here to Chinon and locked in the great round tower of the Coudray. For 3 months in 1308, they sat in that tower, and their most haunting trace is not on the walls, it is on a piece of parchment. In August, 3 cardinals sent by the Pope came to Chinon and questioned the prisoners in secret. What they wrote down became known as the Chinon parchment, and on it, the Pope's own commissioners record that they heard the Grand Master take back his tortured confession, and that they absolved Jacques de Molay and the leaders of the Templars of the charge of heresy. That document could have saved the order. Instead, it was misfiled in the secret archives of the Vatican and lay lost there for very nearly 700 years, until a historian rediscovered it in 2001. By then, it was 7 centuries too late. The absolution at Chinon changed nothing. The order was crushed in 1312, and in 1314, Jacques de Molay was burned alive on an island in the Seine in Paris. Visitors to the Coudray Tower are still shown the crosses and figures carved into its walls and told that the captive Templars scratched them there in their last free months. It is a wonderful story. It may even be partly true. But much of it is undocumented, and several of the carvings you see today are reproductions. The tower keeps its secret, the way this fortress keeps all of them. And so we come back to the girl in the hall. By the winter of 1429, France was on its knees. The English and their Burgundian allies held Paris and the north. The English were besieging Orléans, the gateway to the south, and the man who should have been King of France, Charles VII, was an uncrowned, unsure, half-defeated dauphin, running out of money, luck, and hope. Into that ruin walked Joan, a teenage peasant girl from the far eastern edge of the kingdom, who said the voices of saints had sent her to save France and crown her king. She had crossed hundreds of miles of enemy territory to reach him, and she reached him here, at Chinon, in late February 1429. Now, the legend. The disguised king, the crowded hall, the girl who crosses the room and picks him out by divine sign in a single miraculous stroke. It is a magnificent scene, and the fortress's own historians will tell you plainly that it never happened like that. What the legend does is squeeze 2 separate meetings, weeks apart, into one perfect moment. Here is what the records actually describe. Joan's first audience, on the 25th of February, was small and private in the king's apartments, and afterwards she was lodged, of all the places in this fortress, in the very same Coudray Tower that had held the Templars 120 years before. Then Charles did the sensible thing. He sent her south to Poitiers to be examined for weeks by his theologians, to be certain she was neither a madwoman nor a witch. Only when she came back and was received again in a grand and public audience sometime in late March or early April did the meeting take on the ceremonial weight that the legend later folded into that very first glance. The words she is remembered for speaking to him come down to us from her confessor, who repeated them years later at the trial that finally cleared her name.
Gentle dauphin, I am Joan the Maid. The King of Heaven commands that through me you be anointed and crowned in the city of Reims, a lieutenant of the King of Heaven, who is the true King of France.
From this rock, she rode out to keep that promise. Within weeks, she had broken the English siege of Orléans. Within months, she stood beside Charles in the cathedral at Reims, as he was crowned the anointed King of France. The exact thing she had told him in this fortress that God had sent her to do. It was the turning point of the 100 Years' War. The great hall where the Dauphin received her survives today only as a fragment, a broken wall and a single vast fireplace standing open to the sky in the middle castle. The court she knew moved on to softer houses after the 15th century, and Chinon began the long slide that nearly destroyed it. That a place remembered above all for a scene that may never have happened should end as a ruin open to the weather feels somehow exactly right. The story was always bigger than the stone. By the 17th century, Chinon had lost its purpose. Cannon had made high stone walls obsolete, the court had gone, and the great fortress was left to decay above the town. Its grounds were opened as a public promenade in 1824. Crumbling and dangerous and all, it was listed as a historic monument in 1840. And yet, in 1854, the town of Chinon judged the ruins so unsafe that it formally petitioned to have them torn down. The fortress where the crown of France had changed hands twice over was very nearly demolished for scrap. It was saved by a writer, Prosper Mérimée, the author of the story that became the opera Carmen, and in his day the Inspector General of France's historic monuments stepped in, refused to let it fall, and set its rescue in motion. The Great Restoration came at last in the early 21st century. Between the early 2000s and 2010, archaeologists excavated the spur as never before and rewrote parts of its history, while builders brought the royal lodgings honestly back to life. Original stone below, modern roofs above, no fake medievalism. And what they uncovered only deepened the point. This is the Loire castle that refused to become a palace. Its neighbors downstream, the beautiful photographed chateaux of the Renaissance, were built to be looked at. Chinon was built to be held, and it kept the harder, older story that the pretty houses smoothed away. Stripped of its roofs and its court, half ruined and open to the sky, it ends up telling a plainer and in some ways a truer story than any of them. The story of the Loire in the centuries when the river was a frontier and a castle was still meant to be defended. An English king died here, an empire fell here, a grand master waited for the fire here, and a girl from Lorraine found her king here and set him on the road to his crown. The rock kept them all, everyone, long after their crowns had turned to dust. If you ever go, climb the ridge from the old town, or take the free panoramic lift if you'd rather spare your legs, and stand in the ruined Great Hall where the dauphin met his maid, then walk the ramparts for the long view over the slate roofs, the Vienne, and the vineyards that still make the town's famous red wine. And read the full story, with every source, in the written guide linked below. Fontevraud Abbey, where Henry and Eleanor lie beneath their painted effigies, is a short drive away, and makes the natural next stop. And if castles with stories like this one are your kind of history, subscribe. The StoneKeep Atlas archive already holds 100 of them, from the Rhine to the Loire, with more episodes on the way.